Don't you just hate it when a season you're watching ends, leaves you hanging, to be continued? Well, that's what the Daily Office is doing to us this week. This week and next, we move from the book of Daniel to the wisdom of Solomon. And it's an odd transition from the middle of Daniel's writing, right there where the action is hot and heavy, writing now over to one of the books of the Apocrypha. Why that change? Well, we've seen the effectiveness of Daniel's witness in the courts of the pagan empires of Babylon and Persia. From the very pinnacle of the power structure, Daniel is able to plant seeds of faith in the pagan minds of the emperors, and through them outward to the empires. It's really very exciting what he's able to accomplish. Now, the wisdom of Solomon is trying to do the same thing. This is after the Babylonian captivity, where you have large populations of Jews living in pagan cities all over the ancient world, kind of like Daniel was. Jews in Gentile settings in the ancient world are often under great pressure. There's intimidation, there's enticement to abandon the distinctiveness of their Jewish faith. And there were many such distinctions that made Jews stick out like a sore thumb in the Gentile societies in which they were scattered. This is called the diaspora. And wisdom was written roughly a century before the birth of Jesus, probably in Alexandria, Egypt, to appeal both to literate Jewish populations, thus tempted, and also to pagan populations who were curious and somewhat open to the Jewish view of the world. So written in Alexandria, 1 century BC, Alexandria was one of the largest population centers of Jews in the ancient world. It was also a major center of Greek philosophy. And so the Book of Wisdom has a very strong Greek feel to it. Now, you're going to notice some themes similar to Daniel, especially where the Book of Wisdom admonishes pagan kings to fear the Lord, to recognize his sovereignty. And the Book of Wisdom, also known as the Wisdom of Solomon, is part of the Apocrypha, as I mentioned, which is why some of you may not be able to find it in your Bible. If not, you can just look it up in your web browser. Now, what is this Apocrypha thing? It's a body of literature from what's called the intertestamental period. Protestants completely exclude the Apocrypha, and Roman Catholics completely include it, and Anglicans typically trying to occupy a middle ground between Protestant and Roman Catholic. Well, we read the Apocrypha, but not for doctrine. We have an explanation of that here in the Book of Common Prayer. If you'd like to look it up, it's in the Articles of Religion on page 868. And it says, "The other books, as Jerome said, the church doth read for example of life and instruction of manners, but yet doth it not apply them to establish any doctrine." And then it has a list of those apocryphal books. So as Jerome taught, Jerome was one of the first ancient Bible scholars. He translated the Old and New Testaments, which were then in Greek, into Latin. His version became the Latin Vulgate. And Jerome said that the Apocrypha were worthy for reading, but not for doctrine. So that's our position on it. And as you read, you'll notice that wisdom obviously has teaching that's very similar to the Bible's, and some teaching that isn't. It seems unfamiliar, like it's railing on the children of forbidden unions, right? So colloquially known as the bastard passages, don't quite pass the smell test, do they? When you read those, do they seem like they're biblical? Not really. For instance, Solomon himself, after whom this book is named, was himself born of an illicit union, famously the son of Bathsheba, right? But this emphasis on the, shall we say, insalubrious outcomes experienced by bastards, it does illustrate the extremely strong support that the wisdom of Solomon gives to the biblical view of marriage, which was really quite unique in the ancient pagan world. So in a city like Alexandria, to have such a strong emphasis on biblically valid unions is quite striking. As you read, you'll also pick up a strong focus on the final judgment. You just gotta love those vivid portrayals of the fate of the wicked, even their thinking while they're being judged by God, in the vivid contrast with the justification of the righteous. God's fighting on their behalf. I love the divine warrior motif at the end of chapter 5 in the wisdom here, and it might be worth comparing to Paul's portrayal of the full armor of God in Ephesians chapter 6. And the praise of divine wisdom in chapter 7 is quite beautiful and worthy of your meditation. That's all we've got for this first half of the week. This week, I don't have much to say at all on Luke's gospel. We'll just leave it with the wisdom for early week, and then later week, we'll drop in on the book of Colossians. I'll see you then.